Okay, well, hello, Allie. For those
Oh,
who are watching, this is our annual year in review discussion. My name is Christian Jewell, and I'm based on the Gold Coast in Australia. And do you want to say hi, Allie?
yeah. My name's Allie Armitage, and I'm based in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the US.
And what's unique about our relationship is that we've been having, it started out as fortnightly conversations, probably a little less in the last year or so, particularly since I've had kids. We've been doing this for, it'll be 8 years in February without having ever met in
Yeah,
person.
it's wild.
And it is wild. And I count you, sincerely, I count you as one of my best friends, Ellie, and someone who I trust above, you know, above so many in terms of what we've shared over those 8 years. It's amazing the connection that we've formed, and just let's start with a bit of gratitude because
Mm,
I appreciate you in my life.
Likewise, I feel so similar and just so grateful for a friendship that has witnessed like so many highs and lows and challenges, and the reflections we've been able to offer each other even from afar is just so meaningful. It really like showed me pre-COVID that you could have like deep, profound relationships that are like through the interwebs.
Yeah, I mean, did that help you during COVID as well, knowing that we've been able to? I felt that
Yeah.
feeling as well. It's like I think I can handle this because I have some experience in human connection without
Yeah.
being in the same place. So
Yeah. Kept me sane for sure. As sane as one could be, right?
well, you're still here,
Love
and
sane.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're still the
True.
same. So that's a good sign. So the purpose of this conversation is really that we're recording what we generally do fortnightly or monthly, but with a view to look back on the last 12 months and look forward across the next 12 months. So we had these little prompts that we've used in previous years. I don't know if you feel like you want to go down this road again, but it can be pretty fluid as well.
Yeah.
One word to sum up 2022, a theme or a major lesson. What have we been ready to let go of or to die away from our life in the last 12 months? Or what's caused us the most friction, difficulty? What's actually changed over the year? And what's been growing, building for us in the year? And if we have time and we're feeling it, an intention for 2023.
Beautiful. Let's do it. You
So do you
want
want
to start
to? No, I
with
want you to start. one
okay.
one word for 2022 for you.
The word, oh man, I had two things that came to me when I've been doing some of my reflection. So I'm gonna break.
Yeah, we'll allow that. It's been 8 years. Come on.
One was slow growth. I feel like last year was really slow and there was a lot that shifted, but it shifted in that like way where it was like it's so like imperceptible. And yet when I look back, I can see all the things that changed, and they were maybe moments where it was like there were some moments where I could really feel it, but a lot of it just was like the tiny little shifts that happen on a daily basis. And within that, I felt like the other thing was new cycles. I feel like I started opening some new chapters for myself around work, relationships, my relationship with like boundaries and how I speak up about them in relationships, and what I'm focused on, somatics, all the things that I've been like, I feel like I just opened the door a tiny crack and there's so much more to go, but the door's
Mm,
open and that feels
mm,
good.
I love that. Yeah, slow growth. And what was the second one?
New cycles
New
or new,
cycles.
yeah,
New cycles. Yeah,
yeah,
that's really clear in what you've shared with me over the last 12 months, actually.
mm, yeah. That's good to hear. How about for
Mm.
you?
For me, the word I think that trumps all others is acceptance.
I could totally see that.
I was kind of torn between using non-resistance and acceptance because I think acceptance is more like a utopia. It's been more about letting go of resistance,
Mm,
but I'm going to say acceptance because it's a more positive word. Non-resistance
yeah,
feels like a negative, so
yeah, yeah.
acceptance. Does that ring true from what you've experienced with me over the last 12 months?
100%. And it sounds like that has been profound, like in your health, your like how you go after goals in life and in your relationships and your family. Like that is beautiful to sum up. And it's a simple word, but that is like quite a journey to
Yeah.
get to energetically, right?
Yeah. You know how some words, well, probably all words in some way, they have a sort of abstract meaning and then they have an embodied meaning. I remember somebody
Yeah.
telling me when I was traveling that as an Australian, you don't really know what cold is. Like you have an abstract understanding of the word cold, but until you like live in an Arctic or a
Iceland.
Scandinavian country, yeah. And then when I lived in Iceland in 2014, and I remember walking down Lagervega, the main street, with like 15 layers and waterproof jacket and waterproof pants, and the wind blowing at 100 kilometers an hour, and my body like moving obliquely in the face of the wind, and the chill just like going through all of that into my bone and into my soul. I'm like, oh, that's what he meant.
Okay, I get
That's
it.
the feeling.
Different
So
level now.
yeah,
Life.
acceptance really easy to say, and then
Yeah.
really, the profound embodiment of it is a completely different experience. So
Totally. And it sounds passive, but I think it's actually quite active. It's really an active choice, or you're deeply engaged from what I experience it to be. I'm curious if you have a different perspective, of course. And it's not like passively allowing. I think it's a, it requires a lot of
yeah,
you energetically.
yeah. Well, it's both been both like simple and difficult at the same time,
Yeah.
and effortless as well. It's
Mhm.
hard to explain, but maybe we can get into the specifics a bit more, so we're not talking
Sure.
philosophically too much. What are the kind of major occurrences for you this year in terms of the cycles, the slow growth? Yeah, do you want to just kind of share whether it's the painful stuff or the good stuff as well? We don't need to be that specific, I suppose, but
Yeah, totally. Um, well, I think a huge one for me that's a new cycle is starting to study somatics and
yeah,
the body. And
yeah.
it's been building, but I finally like got certified in something and can't wait to do more now. But I think that opened up just a really powerful realm and new set of like tools and understanding for myself. And then, of course, I want to work with it and talk about embodiment, like doing it with myself and really coming to understand like how things move through the body and my body and what it's communicating all the time and learning to listen there. um, and I also learned some parts work, which I find, therapy nerdy is really useful and has really come to help me understand like how many different parts of me might be speaking or moving in different directions at any one time. And I think that's part of why things have to go slow is to not bypass like what might be happening there,
Mm,
but to really slow down and like listen and pay attention and try to integrate all of me with
mm,
the movement I'm making. Um, and it's just been so powerful to do that work. And it's so daily, like, man, it's daily.
mhm, mhm,
You can do it a lot and then get out of practice and then forget, like, oh, yeah, what's my body saying right now? Or how do I like listen to what is here? Um, and then I think through that has really started to show me my personality really. I love relating well with people, and so I do a lot to accommodate what well relationship looks and feels like. And so really starting to understand like if my body's like feeling agitated or like it's showing me that I need a boundary or I need to express something or not be quite so accommodating
mhm,
anymore. That
mhm,
has led to me like really having to do some learning around like speaking up and bringing things up in relationships, whether that's romantic or friendships or work relationships. And it's hard. And so I began the work of that, I think, last year, and really trying to honor what, to me at least, what the body will indicate first, often of like, something's off here.
Mm.
Um, Maybe it's just a slight adjustment, or maybe like something big needs to shift. And that feels like probably lifelong work. And in some moments it feels great. And then I think the other thing I've learned is like boundaries do not always feel good.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sometimes I think like, oh, when you set a boundary, it'll feel better. You'll feel more space, and not always right away. Like sometimes it's painful, or, I've learned a lot about attachment theory, and I know I have anxious attachment, so I'm really concerned with the relationship. So sometimes having to set a boundary makes me concerned about how is this going to go.
Yep. Yep.
So all of that. And I think it's just, been really marinating in me. And and I have moments like, being, let's say, like with my family at the holidays and just having less tension and conflict than I've had before, and
Mm.
realizing, oh, some of this is working. Like
Mhm.
something's shifting to the point where it's a little more ease than there was before. And that's a win.
What a great feeling. Yeah, we haven't caught up over the holiday period. My wife and I had a baby since we last spoke as well, so there's a
Kind of a big deal.
bit of water under the bridge, and we usually do debrief about the holiday period. That's so cool to hear because I can't remember who said this, but if you, there's a quote I'm going to totally butcher, but goes something like, if you consider yourself to be highly spiritual, then Ram Dass, actually, if you consider yourself to be highly spiritual, go and spend a week with your family, and then or with your parents, and see how you feel after that, right?
Yep.
Because it all
And
comes up in those familial environments.
it totally does. It totally does. And I mean, from the last few years, I don't know how much I've shared in the years of in review, but there's been a lot of tension and conflict in my family dynamic and relationships. So it's just really nice to see some of that shifting, and to
Mm.
recognize, like, I think a lot of it is me changing.
Yeah.
And of course they're changing too, because we're all dynamic. And it's nice to like feel the fruits of that. Um, yeah.
High
So
five. That's really cool.
yeah,
I'm
thank
very
you.
happy to hear that.
Yeah, totally. I think there's been other things like around, just stability and some work things, but we'll get into that later. I feel like we're
Yeah. Yeah.
prepared
I mean,
our-
those were the two obvious things: the somatics and the part therapy stuff, and then yeah, the other part in the sort of second half of the year that I really saw was your abundance in work,
Mhm.
and sort of like a hero's journey in terms of returning to some of the work you've done in previous years, but with that mindfulness of the body's relationship, bringing some of those principles that you've learned through somatic therapy,
Yeah.
just into those, like, corporate environments, I guess you'd say, as well. It's
Yeah.
really cool. Really
Yeah.
cool.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. There's more to come probably with that, I hope.
Yeah. And just like the other cool thing that I just realized with your experience with your family as well is that you can be doing the same stuff, and if you've changed on the inside, those environments feel different, right?
Yes.
So that's been a
Totally.
big thing for me in the past, is so much about trying to change my environments to feel better about myself internally. And it's that's pretty difficult for me to do at this stage in my life. And it hasn't worked anyway. So like, it's an inside job really, isn't it? That's what I've been discovering.
Totally. Yes. And yeah, I think also, I want to give a shout out because I do a lot of EMDR and
Hmm.
therapy, and
Hmm.
that's a modality that's been really profound for me around releasing the charge, like things that trigger you, like sometimes like just literally need to like move, like be processed and like move through you. And
Hmm.
that's been really helpful for me, as has like shifting perspectives and things like that. But sometimes you need like actual tools to like help regulate or like move things that usually come up when you're in those environments. And then when that's shifted, yeah, there can just be so much, like that inner environment is a really different place.
Yeah.
which is
Yeah. It's great to see those tools like working for you so much as well.
yeah, totally. So yeah, how about for you this year, specifics around acceptance and what's shifted for you maybe in that?
Yeah, well, our lives have really crossed over in beautiful ways this year in terms of the mind body work,
Mhm.
and that's been a big theme in my year. And it started really at the start of the year with my body. I was diagnosed with a chronic condition at the end of 2021 called ankylosing spondylitis,
Mm.
a chronic back condition that was giving me excruciating pain in the middle of the night, depriving me of sleep, limiting my ability to exercise, my mood, um, my overall health. And being diagnosed with that condition was actually something that was quite empowering for me at the time because it allowed me to know what I was dealing with. But with the side effect of it being a chronic condition, which chronic, means it can't be cured by definition. So this was meant to be a lifelong illness that I was going to have to manage with medication, and I was going down a path with a rheumatologist to be approved for a particular hardcore, in hindsight, medication, anti-inflammatory medication that I'd have to inject, like my wife injects insulin for her type 1 diabetes for the rest of my life. And as I was jumping through the hoops, this is quite really an expensive drug that I was being approved for. This is kind of middle of January, I think, this in 2022. When I was at the last hurdle, my body just, like talking about somatics, my body just set off an alarm bell. It just went, no, this is not right for me. There's got to be another way. And I ended up doing some searching on the internet, like a lot of people do who are diagnosed with this condition, and finding a lot of people who are talking about fighting the pain, fighting the symptoms. And eventually I came across a podcast with a guy called Sky Denton interviewing a guy called Peter Winslow. And Peter Winslow, this person had lived with ankylosing spondylitis and had gone into remission and had been in remission from the symptoms of AS for over 30 years without a relapse. And he was sharing a completely different message. He's actually a life coach now, and he's been doing this work for decades. He was sharing a completely different message, which was this wasn't a genetic disease necessarily. Genes played a part in it, but the root cause of this condition, which resonated for me, was chronic unresolved stress and unresolved emotion. And I started to kind of realize that the incidence of AS for me began when my best mate Grant was diagnosed with cancer back in 2018. And through that period of time, 2018, 2019, there was a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stress, a lot of unresolved stress for me. And yeah, it just all made sense. So I ended up getting support from Peter, did a program called the AS Recovery Challenge with some other great people from around the world with this condition. Within that sort of 8-week program, I was getting relief from AS, not necessarily through doing anything medical, but through dealing with stress and letting it go. And there's a lot to it. I guess we can unpack it, but it was a complete lifestyle change for me. And I probably haven't shared this with a lot of my work clients as well, but I took a lot more holidays in 2022. I prioritized my family. I prioritized exercise and surfing, and I started going to the gym and doing strength training, which has just felt amazing for my body. Doing a lot of stretching and just living like a healthy person and focusing on what feels good. And yeah, this has been a game changer for me. And yeah, probably the best year of my life, really, if I'm to be honest. Which on the back of the last couple of years, it's a miracle. And so, yeah, I'm in full remission from ankylosing spondylitis. I'm on no medication. I don't experience any symptoms. I have been, I did the program with Peter started in March, and it went through to May, June I ended up getting some life coaching from him for the second half of the year as well, and I've just continued to live the principles that I've learnt. And so much of it, when you're talking about the somatics as well, it is about a state of being in each moment. Um, One of the great books I read this year was A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, and very much he talks about, you know, the eternal now moment, that all we ever have is this moment right here and now, um, and that the past and the future are all just phantom, either memory or fantasy. You know, in that moment, we always experience those through the present as well. So that's been my practice: is who am I being in this present moment, and what am I resisting? You know, what do I want to be different about this moment? Because that's where the pain and suffering has been for me. And you can do your own research if you know about AS, but the logic that really resonated with me is that the kind of stress hormones that are released when we're dealing with mental or emotional stress, um, the fight or flight hormones and chemicals are not meant to be released several times a day, every day of our life. So these hormones and chemicals are telling my body that I'm not well, giving it the wrong messages that I'm sick, and my body was attacking itself, and that's the inflammation that I was experiencing that caused the back pain. As Peter says, that lives in the house that Jack built. So it's all for me. That has been the light bulb moment. Is just like, I need to get a handle of the unresolved emotional stress in my life, or it's gonna kill me. I hate to say it.
Huge.
Yeah, and I have, and then the results speak for themselves. Yeah, I'm fitter and healthier and stronger than I've ever been in my life right now.
It's
Which is
amazing.
pretty awesome.
Yeah, totally. And like that takes such a willingness to explore, you know, an alternative perspective than maybe what the traditional like medical world would say. And so I think you did a lot of the work, obviously, but the first work was that you were open and
Yeah.
that you, like, considered something else. And like you said, it really resonated for you. And that's the most important thing is it does have
Yeah,
to, of course, it's like,
exactly. And I mean, like, I want to be really clear as well that I still seek like mainstream medical
yeah,
support for lots of things as well. So I'm not against hospitals. Our daughter was born in a hospital. You know, I'm not against mainstream medicine, but this is the somatics thing. Was my body was telling me this is not the right path for me. This is not. There's no healing here, basically,
yeah.
and
And that's
that intuition.
totally. And it's important, I think, to call it out because it's not necessarily that, and that perspective isn't necessarily encouraged if you go to a traditional doctor. So like being it depends, probably there are some I'm sure who do, but like just to know that like being open to what your body's actually trying to tell you can make such a difference in your health and your well-being and like your ability to find resolution, you know.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I mean, it's probably why you and I have like followed our curiosity to explore these alternative, non-mainstream, I guess, approaches, because the mind-body connection is not recognized in mainstream medicine at the
You
moment, and
totally.
we know from our own experience that that connection is irrefutable. You know, it's like when you have a thought, and your my face starts to go red and I start to sweat, that's a mind body connection, you know, a thought that has had a physiological response in my body. So
Yeah,
yeah, nobody's talking about necessarily in the mainstream about the role that stress plays in a lot of these conditions, and inflammation in particular. And yeah, I'm not the only one. I'm definitely not the only one in the last 2 or 3 years that has experienced chronic stress, unresolved
totally.
stress.
Totally.
Mm.
And the nervous system, and like, of course, I mean, sometimes when you take a look, you're like, oh, of course, they're all linked, right? Like, but yeah, that is just not always what the linkage that's like showed for us. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot I could go into around that, but we'll just leave it for now. That's a soapbox for me for sure. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Um, do you have any particular challenges you want to sort of raise from 2022 and how they've taught you something?
Yeah. I think one thing I've been noticing for myself is that the last few years, because of COVID, and then also for me, because of moving somewhere new right before COVID happened, like, I mean, talk about body and nervous system. I think I did a little like needing to kind of go inward for protection and safety and survival, like so many of us did. And that felt like what was needed at the moment in time. And I'm as the world is shifting and I'm shifting, I'm noticing like, oh, I need to get back into that state of expansion and openness.
Hmm.
And I have the bandwidth now. I'm really coming to learn that you do need to work with yourself. And I have in the past had a tendency sometimes to just like bypass my feelings of fear or doubt. And I no longer believe that personally, that we should just trample over them to get to some goal, but
Yeah,
really slow down and like listen and pay attention and work with them.
yeah,
Doesn't You don't need to stop the show.
yeah.
And um, in that tending, I'm realizing like I'm ready to take some more risks again. And I feel like there was a level of like kind of needing safety and stability that I had for the last few years. And I think last year, especially like putting some foundations down for myself was a big thing. And I was doing that around work. And I think just in other areas of life too. Um, Probably in relationships and friendships and dating and all of that. And I now want the stretch. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm ready for things to be more experimental. I have the ability to like do some things that are like outside of the box again and take some courageous risks.
Mm,
And I want that magic back.
hmm.
I have really felt like the last few years, like I kept feeling like, gosh, some of the magic of life feels like I can't get a hold of it, or like the world feels so narrow. And I think that's just real. It's probably what it is to go through a pandemic, you
Yeah,
know?
100%. I was just talking to someone about this yesterday. There's one of the books that I read in my AS recovery challenge was The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. And a lot of his research is around cell activity and cell health and how that sort of carries out throughout, affects the whole body. And probably the thing that stuck with me from that book the most is that he says at a cellular level, our bodies can't be in protection mode and growth mode at the same time. And so if we are in a state of protection, which is fight, flight, or freeze, really about survival, that's at every level of our body. That's, we're just trying to stay safe. And I love the way you described that too, because this was the other, aha moment with me in this training this year is we don't change things by fighting what is. So acceptance, it's not about loving how things are at the moment, but we have to be okay with it, right? And so that's the way that Peter sort of taught me is like when I'm sort of talking through a situation, I'm like, okay, this is how it is for now, and I'm okay with that. And then casting our energy toward what we prefer, or to the opposite virtue is the way that he talks about it. So I'm okay
Mm,
with this. I'm okay with whatever happens. I'm okay up until death. That's really the aspirations. I am okay with whatever happens, and I would prefer more. I don't
yeah.
need it. I don't necessarily like want it, but I just prefer lightly something different.
Totally. And that's one of the biggest things I was learning in the somatics class that I thought was so powerful was like, first you have to be with what is.
Yeah.
And that's actually how change happens. And that is so freaking like contrary to what I thought or how I feel like I've been conditioned to believe that change happens, and that it's first like meeting with what is and accepting and like being with, let's say in the body, whatever sensation is there without making it wrong or
Hmm.
bad. And like from a somatic level, it's learning to trust that the energy that you might be sensing, when it's met with unconditionality and acceptance, it will move and it will find its own resolution. And it just needs the safe container for that to take place.
Mhm.
And I mean, I feel like that's a metaphor for life, but that just really has been really a huge shift for me, is to like work with that more and recognize it.
Yeah, I think we're starting to touch on the embodiment of of acceptance versus the abstract idea of it. Can I
Yeah.
share? Can I share? One of the experiences that I had this year that I think can illustrate that.
Yeah.
And it was really the turning point in my healing from AS. So I was 3/4 of the way through the program, and my beautiful wife Hannah was so supportive of me reaching a sort of point with our daughter, who's was 2 at the time, had turned 2 at the time in April, to book for myself a week's holiday in Bali with my friend Honor, who's living over in Bali at the moment, to go surfing, which was like out of the picture, even 6 months earlier. And I had a lot of resistance to that at first, but then with her support, I pulled the trigger and had the most amazing week. Surfed every day, had a massage every day. I started to stop taking some of my anti-inflammatory medication on that trip because I was feeling relaxed and experimenting it, with how my body was feeling. I came home feeling just like energized and alive and really on the path to healing. And my daughter Harriet, who I'd missed, dearly, I hadn't been away from her for that long, absolutely rejected me. Like the night I came home, just didn't want to have anything to do with me, and like screamed at me. And one particular experience I can remember just being on the couch where she like yelled at me and told me to go away. And I just, I can feel emotional just saying it now, but I just like lost it. I just bawled and bawled, and immediately what I felt deep down in my body was the belief that I am not enough for my daughter as a father. Like the deep wound that was at the core of this like unconscious stress was a feeling of not being enough as a father.
Mm.
And that was a point where I began to heal, because when I could like feel it and accept it, okay, this is a really
Yeah.
like ugly, gross feeling that I'm experiencing in my body, and I'm okay with it. And that started to release it. And then I could zoom out from it and go, I'm more than enough for my daughter. Like I'm the right father for my daughter. I'm the best dad for my daughter. No one else could be a better dad than I am for her. And I started to think about how much I love her, turn my energy to that, opposite virtue. And yeah, it all went uphill from there. So the letting go of that emotion and that belief, which I didn't realize, it was unconscious, it became conscious in that moment. So
Yeah.
that was the beauty of healing, I guess, through the body and embodying the emotion and accepting it.
Yeah. And just welcoming it to be there. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's
Yeah,
vulnerable and
thank you.
real.
Yeah,
And such a, I mean, I'm also really coming to believe that like every natural experience, like every natural reaction we have is actually valid, even if it's not what we want, but there's a reason for that. And God, I do this in myself so much. It's like I should be feeling this way, or I need to get to this experience. And I think even in the personal growth world, it's like really easy to feel like if you're not feeling at ease all the time, you're doing something wrong, or if you're
yeah.
not in your most empowered state, something's wrong. But we just have these reactions and there's good reason for them. So like letting them be there and accepting them and welcoming them and letting them move. That's just really profound.
Thank you. And it's funny you say that about setting goals and growing, and that propensity to push into the strive, which has been a big part of my life, all of my life up until last year. It's kind of no coincidence that you and I don't talk about goal setting at this time of the year anymore. I don't know about you, but I have pretty much let go of setting goals.
Mhm.
It was more along intentions, and even now I'm lighter than that.
Mhm.
Because I can sort of trust if I am in living in the moment and I'm in tune with my intuition, I'm going to live out what I'm meant to be doing. If I'm being, you know, myself, if I'm being who I am, so, meant to be and living that way, then in each moment it will reveal to me the direction that I need to go. So that's
Mhm.
felt a lot lighter and simpler for me as well. I think we're coming down on time because I know you've got to head off. So I thought that might also be a little segue for, I guess, like how you're feeling about the year ahead and any intentionality that you have or what you're sensing.
Yeah, I love what you just shared. That's like feels very
Well, isn't it funny though? It's like we have stopped talking about like concrete goals and
yeah,
less and less every year that we've had this conversation as we've gotten
yeah,
older and learnt more.
it's totally true. And I actually this year did some like intention yeah, their intentions, there's a bajillion of them, but I just like did a lot of like free writing around like where my energy wants to go and what is feeling like it's rising up again. Because what you just described sounded just like going with emergence, which I think like when you're attuned and really listening, you can feel for like what wants to come alive in your
Mhm.
life. And that to me is what I want to be like taken care of, you know?
Well, Peter, my coach describes it as riding the waves of serendipity, which I really
Yeah,
love. Being a
yeah.
surfer as well, and if we chatted longer, we could talk about some of the serendipity that we've experienced this year. But I had a very profound encounter with someone on an aeroplane coming back from Melbourne that's led to a wonderful connection and path that we're going down at the moment as well. So I'm very into serendipity and tuning to that
Yeah,
frequency.
yeah, totally. That makes I mean, I think it's what makes life magical in a lot of ways. But I do like my I'm really thinking about multiple things. One, like bringing back the like desires and dreams and like getting bigger with what I'm hoping for my life and what I think is possible and like letting my world come back open. That's an intention I have. I think it will include more travel for me too, because I just miss that in my life. And creating and yeah, there's things I want to like step out into in terms of creating and bringing like a lot of this new work that I've been interested in into the world. um, Relationships and partnership and dating is just feeling really palpable for me, and so that's another like intention that I'm
Nice.
moving towards. um, but and with it all kind of like being in this process of like being like courageous and also like having roots and deep embodiment and like navigating between like stretching out and like being going deep into something that's like rooted and like you know fully taking up the space that's me, and taking care of that and knowing that that's my job.
Mm.
So
I
that,
feel like I feel like the theme of openness is pretty consistent with what you shared as well. There's just this
yeah,
like growing openness
yes,
to
yeah,
explore and
yeah,
take
yeah.
on new possibilities.
And coming from a few years of like more inward time, it's like, okay, well, what roots have gone into the ground that I can like be extending from and building upon rather than like it's starting fresh all over, I'm like
Mm,
taking with me what has been growing.
mm,
How about for
beautiful.
you?
Yeah. Oh, well, I haven't done any reflecting on the year ahead yet. The one thing that came to my mind is, the way that our inner dialogue works, I think has a big part on our moment by moment experience. So the one of the techniques that we use in my coaching program is statements we say to ourselves that use the words "I am," and when they're empowering and true, can be really supportive. So I am learning has been a great one for me in the last 12 months.
Mm,
That's really guided a lot of my actions. And then there's also another great question, from a place of abundance and being okay with what is, and loving the situation, is to ask the question, how does it get better than this? So that sort of seems like my theme for 2023, is like asking myself, how does it get better than this? Which is already, showing that I'm grateful and abundant in the here and now. Yeah, I mean, you and I've talked about this year. I have seen other people in my friendships and relationships who have suffered greatly this year. I have a close friend who's going through a cancer journey at the moment, which is very difficult. Someone, close to my age, a childhood friend as well. And I don't take for granted that I'm going to live forever. And I don't take for granted that my loved ones are going to be here forever as well. So just loving what I have right now is really important, and then being curious about how it can get better. That's my intention for 2023.
It's beautiful. Wow.
I tell you what, though, having a second child and a screaming newborn is, going to visit your parents is really, if you think you're spiritual, going to visit your parents is number one, but number two is bringing a newborn home and having a 2-year-old in the house as well, I reckon.
I can only imagine.
So yes, I've been challenged big time in the last 3.5 weeks.
And yet here you are, like, espousing all this wisdom. So you're connected somehow.
So far, so good. And I'm incredibly grateful, for the experiences that I've had to guide me. I wrote a song. Actually, music's been a really big part of the second half of my year, and I've tapped into my creative flow and source in the second half of this year. So music is going to play a part in my year for sure. And I wrote a song toward the end of last year called Second Go, which was all about the beauty of being in my 40s and being able to have a second, third, fourth, fifth go at things that I've failed at or haven't got right in my younger years. And just the beauty of like hindsight and learning. And most of us, in most situations get a second go, and that's awesome. We get to do it again and do it better. So having a second child, it feels so much easier, even though still challenging. Having the learnings from COVID and all that stress. I'm so grateful we're not there right now.
Yeah, totally. It feels kind of like I can really relate with that, because I feel like I'm coming back around to all the things I wanted for my life when I moved here before COVID happened. And it's like, okay, that happened. And now, okay, where am I at now? And like, what's possible from here? So like letting ourselves have that, second go. With all the insight and wisdom we learned from the first go too.
Exactly. Well, here's to that. I hope it's a wonderful year. I know it will be. I know our friendship will continue to blossom. And finally, just in closing, thank you for being such a trusted and close friend to me, not just in the last 12 months, but for the last 8 years. Amazing.
Likewise, thank you for your presence and listening, and how you just see me and the situations that we bring to each other. It's very like mutually nourishing, and I cherish that so much.
Love you heaps, and I hope that's been supportive for anyone else who's shared some of our lessons and learnings in the last 12 months as well. Thank you for listening if you have listened this far. All right. See you soon, my friend. Take care.